The transport ship Aurora descended through the purple clouds of Prime, and Lieutenant Commander Cooper pressed his face against the observation window like a child seeing snow for the first time. He had served in the Terran Navy for 15 years. He had visited dozens of worlds across 3 different star systems, but nothing had prepared him for this. The planet below was alive with color. Forests of crystalline trees caught the light of twin suns and scattered it into rainbows that danced across valleys of silver grass. Rivers of something that looked like liquid gold wound through mountains that glowed faintly from within. Cities rose from the landscape like organic growths, their towers spiraling upward in patterns that seemed to follow no human logic, but possessed a beauty that made his chest ache. "First time seeing?" asked a voice behind him. Turned to find Captain Hayes watching him with an amused smile. She was a small woman with gray streaks in her dark hair and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. She had commanded the diplomatic vessel Harmony for 20 years, and there was no one in the fleet trusted more. "Is it that obvious?" he asked. "You've got the look. Everyone gets it their first time here." She moved to stand beside him at the window. They have been building their civilization for over 10,000 years. They were traveling between stars when humans were still figuring out how to make fire. Absorbed this information in silence. The briefing files had told him about them, of course. Tall, graceful beings with iridescent skin that shifted colors with their emotions. 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern that could see spectrums of light invisible to humans, measured in centuries rather than decades. A culture built on art, philosophy, and a complex system of honor debts that humans were only beginning to understand. What the briefing files had not told him was how it would feel to see their world with his own eyes. "The Queen has ruled for over 300 years, Captain Hayes continued. She's seen empires rise and fall. She's negotiated treaties with species that went extinct before humanity left Earth, and she has agreed to meet with us. Because she wants something," said. "It was not a question. She wants trade routes through our space. We want access to their medical technology. It's a simple exchange, really. The hard part is not offending anyone in the process." Nodded. This was why he was here. His official title was Chief of Security for the diplomatic mission, but his real job was to stand in the background, look alert, and make sure no one got killed while the diplomats did their work. It was not glamorous duty, but it was important. The transport ship broke through the final layer of clouds, and the capital city of Prime spread out below them like a dream given form. Towers of living crystal rose toward the sky, connected by bridges that seemed too delicate to support any weight. Gardens floated in midair, held aloft by technology that humans could not begin to understand. At the center of it all stood the royal palace, a structure so vast and beautiful that had to look away because staring at it too long made his eyes water. "Welcome to," Captain Hayes said. "Try not to start any wars." The landing was smooth. They had provided a pad at the edge of the palace grounds, and as the transport's ramp lowered, got his first breath of alien air. It smelled like flowers and electricity, like a storm about to break over a summer garden. It was not unpleasant, but it was definitely not Earth. A delegation was waiting for them at the base of the ramp. 7 in robes of deep purple and silver stood in a formal arrangement, their 4 eyes fixed on the humans with expressions that could not read. At their head was a figure slightly taller than the others, with skin that shifted between shades of deep violet and pale silver in waves that seemed to follow some internal rhythm. "That's Lord," Captain Hayes murmured as they descended the ramp. "He's the Queen's chief advisor, very traditional, very particular about protocol. Follow my lead and don't speak unless spoken to." Fell into step behind the captain, his eyes already scanning the surroundings out of habit. The landing pad was exposed, surrounded by open gardens with no obvious cover. The palace walls were too far away for an effective retreat if something went wrong. There were no visible guards, but that meant nothing. They could have warriors hidden in a dozen places he could not see. It was not that he expected trouble. They had no history of violence against diplomatic missions. But 15 years in security had taught that the moment you stopped expecting trouble was the moment it found you. Lord stepped forward as Captain Hayes reached the bottom of the ramp. He raised one slender hand in a gesture that the briefing files had identified as a formal greeting. "Captain Hayes of the Terran vessel Harmony," he said. His voice was musical, each word carrying undertones that seemed to resonate in his chest. "The Queen welcomes you to Prime. May your time here bring honor to both our peoples." "Lord," Captain Hayes replied, inclining her head at the precise angle the protocol officers had drilled into her. "We are honored by the Queen's invitation. May this meeting strengthen the bonds between our worlds." The formal greetings continued for several minutes, each phrase carefully chosen and delivered with exact precision. Stood at attention behind the captain, his face neutral, his eyes never stopping their slow scan of the surroundings. He noticed that one of the in the delegation kept glancing at him. She was younger than the others, with skin that shifted toward warmer shades of gold and rose. Her robes were simpler, marking her as an assistant of some kind rather than a noble. But her four eyes kept returning to with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. Finally, the formal greetings concluded, and Lord gestured toward the palace. "Quarters have been prepared for your delegation," he said. "The Queen will receive you at the evening meal. Until then, you are welcome to rest from your journey or explore the public areas of the palace grounds." "Thank you, Lord," Captain Hayes said. "We are grateful for your hospitality." The walk to their quarters took them through gardens that description. Plants that had no names grew in patterns that seemed random, but created images when viewed from certain angles. Fountains sprayed water that fell upward, gathering in pools suspended above their heads. Small creatures that might have been birds or insects or something else entirely flitted through the air, their songs adding to the constant music that seemed to permeate everything on this world. Notice that the young assistant had positioned herself near the back of the group, close to where he walked. Several times she seemed about to speak to him, but each time she hesitated and looked away. Their quarters were located in a wing of the palace that had been modified to accommodate human needs. The rooms were still larger and more elaborate than anything had ever seen, but the furniture had been adjusted to human proportions, and the lighting had been tuned to frequencies that did not give him a headache. "Get some rest," Captain Hayes told the team as they gathered in the central sitting room. "The evening meal will be formal, and I need everyone sharp. I want you with me at all times. Don't allow weapons in the Queen's presence, but that doesn't mean I want to go in without security." "Understood," Captain said. The others dispersed to their individual rooms but remained in the sitting area, too alert to sleep. He moved to the window and looked out over the palace gardens, trying to memorize the layout. Old habits died hard. "You are the one called Cooper." He turned to find the young assistant standing in the doorway. Up close, he could see that her eyes were a shade of amber that seemed to glow with internal light. She was younger than he had first thought, perhaps the equivalent of a human in their early 20s. "I am," he said, "and you are." "My name is, I serve as a translator for Lord." She stepped into the room, her movements graceful in a way that made feel clumsy by comparison. "I apologize for starring earlier. I have never seen a human before. The images in our databases do not capture." She paused, searching for words. "You are smaller than I expected, but there is something in your eyes, a watchfulness. It reminds me of our hunters." Was not sure how to respond to this. "I'm a security officer," he said finally. "Watching is my job." "Yes, I read your file when I learned you would be part of the delegation." Moved to the window beside him, following his gaze out over the gardens. "You have an impressive record, many commendations, several incidents where you placed yourself in danger to protect others." She turned to look at him directly. "The incident at station. You pulled 3 wounded crew members from a burning shuttle bay. The fire damaged your hands severely. You nearly died." looked down at his hands. The scars were faint now, years of treatment and regeneration having reduced them to thin white lines across his palms and fingers. But the nerve damage remained. Sometimes his hands shook when he was tired. Sometimes he could not feel things properly. It was a constant reminder of a choice he had made without thinking, a choice that had cost him something he could never fully recover. "They were my crew," he said simply. "I couldn't leave them." Studied him for a long moment. "Among my people, such actions create what we call a life debt. When one person saves another's life, a bond is formed that can never be broken. The saved one owes their existence to the Savior. It is a sacred thing." "We don't have anything like that," said. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," his voice was soft but firm. "Not anyone, you. The files show that other crew members were closer to the burning bay. They did not enter. Only you." She paused. "I wonder what drives a person to such actions. What makes them value another's life above their own?" Before could answer, the door opened and Captain Hayes entered the sitting room. Immediately stepped back, her posture shifting to formal attention. "Lord wishes to see me," the young said. "I hope we will speak again, Lieutenant Commander Cooper." She was gone before could respond. Captain Hayes watched her go with raised eyebrows. "Making friends already?" "Just talking," said. She was curious about humans. The captain moved to sit in one of the human-proportioned chairs. "They are always curious about us. We're a puzzle to them, a species that rose from nothing to interstellar travel in less than 1,000 years. They don't know what to make of us." "Is that good or bad?" "Both, probably. It makes them interested in trading with us, but it also makes them cautious. They've seen young species before. Most of them burned out or destroyed themselves before they got very far." She leaned back in the chair, closing her eyes. "Try to get some rest. I have a feeling tonight is going to be interesting." The evening meal was held in a hall so large that could not see the far end of it. The ceiling vanished into darkness high above, dotted with points of light that might have been stars or crystals or something else entirely. Long tables stretched across the floor, covered in food and decorations that hurts eyes if he looked at them too directly. The human delegation was seated at a table near the raised platform where the Queen would sit. Stood behind Captain Hayes's chair, his eyes moving constantly across the crowd of nobles that filled the hall. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all in elaborate robes that shifted and flowed with movements of their own. The air was thick with music and conversation in a language that sounded like singing. "Relax," Captain Hayes murmured without turning around. "You look like you're about to start a fight." "I look like I'm doing my job," replied, but he made an effort to soften his posture slightly. The royal guard lined the walls of the hall, their ceremonial staffs held vertical. They were tall even by standards, their skin darker than the nobles, their movements precise and synchronized. Had studied the briefing files on them carefully. They were primarily ceremonial, trained more for display than for actual combat. The real security would be hidden, out of sight. A horn sounded somewhere in the distance, and the hall fell silent. Every turn toward the raised platform as a door opened behind the throne. Queen entered the hall. Had seen images of her, but they had not prepared him for reality. She was ancient, her skin showing patterns and depths of color that none of the younger possessed, but she moved with a grace that made everyone else in the room look clumsy by comparison. Her robes seemed to be made of liquid starlight, flowing around her in patterns that followed no physical laws. Her 4 eyes swept across the hall, seeing everything, missing nothing. Behind her walked a young female, and felt his attention sharpen immediately. The princess was small for her species, barely taller than an adult human. Her skin shifted between shades of silver and pale blue, the colors muted and gentle compared to the adults around her. Her robes were simpler than her mother's, but still more elaborate than anything a human royal would wear. She walked with careful precision, clearly conscious of every eye in the room upon her. She looked young, too young for the weight of attention that surrounded her. The queen took her seat on the throne, and the princess settled into a smaller chair at her side. Once they were seated, the hall came back to life, conversation and music resuming as though they had never stopped. The meal that followed was long and complex, with dishes being served and removed in patterns that followed some protocol could not understand. Captain Hayes ate politely, making conversation with the nobles seated near her, watched and waited, and tried to ignore the growing sense of unease that had settled in his chest. Something felt wrong. He could not identify what it was. The guards were in their positions. The nobles were behaving normally. The servants moved through the hall with practiced efficiency. Everything was exactly as it should be. But had learned to trust his instincts, and his instincts were screaming. He let his eyes drift across the hall, searching for anything out of place. The guards along the walls, the servants carrying dishes, the nobles laughing and talking, the queen on her throne speaking with an advisor, the princess beside her picking at her food with obvious boredom. The princess looked up, and their eyes met. Looked away quickly, remembering the protocols about eye contact with royalty, but not before he saw something in the young princess's expression, a flicker of curiosity, a question. The meal continued. More dishes came and went. The conversation grew louder as whatever they were drinking began to take effect. The queen rose to make a speech, her musical voice carrying across the hall with ease. Did not understand the words, but he watched the crowd's reaction, approval, anticipation. Something big was being announced. Captain Hayes leaned back slightly. "She's confirming the trade agreement," she whispered. "We'll have formal signing tomorrow. This is good. This is very good." Nodded, but the unease had not faded. If anything, it was growing stronger. The queen finished her speech, and the hall erupted in what assumed was applause. The nobles raised their glasses in a toast. The music swelled to a crescendo. The lights flickered. His entire body went rigid. His hand moved to his hip, grasping at empty air where his weapon should have been. He saw the same reaction in several of the guards along the walls, their ceremonial poses breaking as they reached for staffs that suddenly did not seem so decorative. The lights flickered again. Then they went out completely. For 3 heartbeats, the hall was plunged into absolute darkness. Heard screams, cries of confusion in a language he did not speak. He moved on pure instinct, positioning himself directly behind Captain Hayes, his body ready to shield her from whatever was coming. The windows exploded inward. Glass and crystal rained across the hall as figures in black armor poured through the breaches. They came from every direction at once, dozens of them, maybe more. They moved with military precision, fanning out to cover the exits while a strike team pushed straight toward the throne. Weapons fire lit up the darkness, pale blue bolts that made no sound but left smoking holes in whatever they touched. Saw 2 of the royal guard fall before they could even raise their staffs. He saw nobles scrambling for cover, their elaborate robes tangling around their legs. He saw servants dropping their dishes and running for the exits, only to be cut down by attackers who showed no mercy. He saw the princess, frozen on the platform beside her mother's throne, her 4 eyes wide with terror. Was moving before he made the conscious decision to do so. He did not think about the fact that he was unarmed. He did not think about the diplomatic consequences of a human interfering in internal affairs. He did not think about his own safety or his duty to Captain Hayes or any of the 100 other considerations that should have kept him in place. He thought only of a young girl in danger and the distance between them. The hall was chaos. Bodies pressed against him from every direction as panicked nobles tried to flee. Weapons fire streaked through the air above his head. Someone screamed right next to his ear, and when he looked, he saw an elderly collapsing with a smoking wound in his chest. Kept moving. The platform where the queen sat was maybe 30 meters away. It might as well have been 30 kilometers through the mass of bodies and the constant weapons fire. But it spent 15 years learning how to move through chaos, how to find paths that others could not see, how to keep going when everything around him was falling apart. He reached the edge of the platform just as the first attacker arrived. The figure in black armor was tall, nearly a head taller than. His weapon was raised, aimed at the frozen princess. Saw the fingers tighten on the trigger, saw the beginning of the motion that would send a killing bolt into the young girl's chest. Hit him from the side. The impact was jarring, sending pain shooting through his shoulder as he collided with the armored figure. They went down together, tumbling across the platform floor. Heard his own breath, harsh and rapid. He felt the cold hardness of the armor beneath his hands. He smelled something burning, maybe the attacker's weapon discharging into the floor beside them. They rolled and ended up on top. His fist came down hard on the attacker's faceplate once, twice, 3 times. The pain was incredible, his hands screaming in protest. But the faceplate cracked on the 3rd blow, and the figure beneath him went limp. Scrambled to his feet, grabbing the fallen weapon. It was unfamiliar in his hands, the grip too large for human fingers. But a weapon was a weapon. More attackers were coming. He could see them pushing through the crowd, converging on the platform from multiple directions. 3 of them. No, 4. Their weapons raised, their movements coordinated. Professional, trained. Positioned himself between them and the princess. "Stay behind me," he said, not knowing if she could understand him, not caring. The words were for himself as much as for her, a reminder of what he was here to do. The first attacker reached the platform steps, fired, and the stolen weapon bucked in his hands. The shot went wide, striking the wall behind the attacker. Too much recoil, the sights calibrated for eyes, not human ones. He adjusted, fired again. This time the bolt caught the attacker in the chest, sending him tumbling backward into his companions. 2 more came from the left, spun, firing as he moved. 1 shot hit, 1 missed. The surviving attacker raised his weapon. The bolt caught in the shoulder. The impact spun him around, white-hot pain exploding through his upper body. He staggered but did not fall, could not fall. The princess was right behind him, and there were more attackers coming, and if he fell, she would die. He raised his weapon with his remaining good arm and fired again. Another attacker fell, but there were more behind him, always more, an endless stream of black-armored figures pouring toward the platform. Saw them through a haze of pain and adrenaline. He saw the queen moving somewhere to his left, her hands glowing with pale violet light. He saw the royal guard finally engaging, their ceremonial staffs suddenly very deadly indeed. But he also saw the attacker raising his weapon directly at the princess. Threw himself in front of the shot. The bolt hit him square in the back. For a moment he felt nothing at all. Then the pain came, worse than anything he had ever experienced, worse than the fire at station, worse than anything he could have imagined. His legs gave out beneath him. He fell forward, catching himself on the edge of the queen's throne. Through dimming vision, he saw the princess staring at him with those 4 wide eyes. She was saying something, her musical voice high with fear. Her small hands reached out, pressing against his chest, trying to hold something in that kept wanting to come out. "Stay down," managed to say, though his voice was barely a whisper. "Stay." The darkness took him, woke to pain and the smell of something floral. He was lying in a bed that was too large for him, in a room that was definitely not on the harmony. The ceiling above him was high and vaulted, made of the same luminous stone as the rest of the palace. Soft light filtered through windows covered with curtains that moved slowly, as though caught in a breeze he could not feel. Medical equipment surrounded his bed. Some of it was recognizable from human designs. Most of it was completely alien. Tubes ran from machines into his arm, carrying liquids that glowed faintly in the dim light. "You are awake." The voice came from his left. turned his head, wincing at the pain the movement caused, and found himself looking at Queen. She sat in a chair beside his bed, her elaborate robes replaced by something simpler, almost plain by standards. Without her royal regalia, she looked older than she had in the hall. The colors of her skin were muted, the shifting patterns slower, but her four eyes were sharp and alert, watching him with an intensity that made him want to look away. "Your Majesty," he said. His voice came out as a croak, his throat dry and painful. "Do not try to speak yet." The Queen rose from her chair and moved to a small table nearby. She poured water from a crystal pitcher into a glass and brought it to him, helping him lift his head to drink. The water was cool and tasted faintly of something sweet. "The physicians have done their work. Your wounds are healing, but you pushed your body far beyond its limits. Recovery will take time." Lay back against the pillows, trying to organize his scattered thoughts. The attack in the hall, the weapon's fire, the princess. "The princess," he said, his voice slightly stronger. "Is she unharmed?" The Queen's voice was soft, but there was something in it that could not identify. "Because of you." Relief flooded through him, so strong that for a moment he thought he might pass out again. "Good, that's good. You took 2 shots that were meant for her." The Queen returned to her chair, her movements slow and deliberate. "Our weapons are designed to kill with a single hit. That you survived one is remarkable. That you survived 2 is nothing short of miraculous." "I've always been too stubborn to die," said. It was an old joke, something he used to say to his crew after difficult missions. It felt hollow now in this alien room, speaking to this alien queen. "So it would seem." The Queen was silent for a long moment, her 4 eyes never leaving his face. "Tell me, Lieutenant Commander Cooper, why did you do it?" "Do what, Your Majesty?" "Save my daughter." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that pressed down on his chest. "You are a human, a visitor to our world. You have no connection to, no loyalty to our crown, no reason to risk your life for a stranger. And yet when danger came, you did not hesitate. You threw yourself into the path of weapons fire to protect a child you had never spoken to. Why?" Considered the question. It deserved a real answer, not a platitude or a deflection, but he was not sure he had one. "I saw her," he said finally, "frozen, scared, too young to understand what was happening, and I saw the weapon pointed at her." He paused, searching for words. "I didn't make a choice, Your Majesty. There was no moment where I weighed options or calculated risks. I just moved, because that's who I am, that's what I do." "You protect people." "Yes, even at the cost of your own life." "If necessary." The Queen leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "Among my people, what you did creates a debt that can never be repaid. When one person gives their life to save another, a bond is formed that transcends politics, transcends species, transcends everything. You gave yourself to protect my daughter. By our laws, by our most ancient traditions, you now belong to her, and she belongs to you." Felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with his injuries. "Your Majesty, I'm just a security officer. I did what anyone would have done." "No," the Queen's voice was firm. "You did what you would do. Others in that hall had the opportunity to act. Your own captain was closer to the platform than you were when the attack began. Yet you were the one who moved. You were the one who fought. You were the one who bled." She rose from her chair and moved to the window, looking out over something that could not see from his position on the bed. "The attackers were from a faction that opposes contact with other species," she continued. "They believe that should remain isolated, that trade with humans will corrupt our culture. They have been growing in strength for decades, but I never thought they would be bold enough to strike at the heart of my court." "Were they all caught?" asked. "Most were killed in the attack. Those who survived are being questioned." The Queen's voice hardened. "They will tell us everything they know, and then they will face justice." Nodded, though he suspected that justice was very different from the human kind. "Your ship has been in orbit since the attack," the Queen said, turning back to face him. "Your captain has been very concerned about you. She has requested permission to beam you aboard so that your own physicians can treat you." "That's probably for the best," said. "Human medicine for human injuries." "I her request." The words hung in the air between them. Stared at the Queen, not quite believing what he had heard. "Your Majesty, you will not be returning to your ship, Lieutenant Commander Cooper." The Queen moved back to stand beside his bed, looking down at him with those ancient, knowing eyes. "Not yet. Perhaps not ever." "I don't understand." "You saved my daughter's life. That act cannot be repaid with gifts or titles or trade agreements. It can only be honored by keeping you here, close to the one you saved, where we can protect you as you protected her." Pushed himself up on his elbows, ignoring the protest from his healing wounds. "Your Majesty, I have duties, a career, a life in human space. You can't just keep me here against my will." "I can." The Queen's voice was gentle but firm. "I am the Queen. My word is law on Prime, and I have decided that you will remain." "That's not how humanity works. We have rights, freedoms. And you have a young princess who has not stopped asking about you since you fell." The Queen's expression softened. "She sits outside this room every day, waiting to hear that you have awakened. She has refused to attend her lessons, refused to eat in the Great Hall, refused to do anything but wait." Felt something shift in his chest, and it was not the healing wound. "She is young," the Queen continued, "barely past adolescence in our reckoning, too young to understand duty or politics or the complicated relationships between species. She knows only that a stranger threw himself between her and death, and she wishes to thank him. She doesn't owe me anything." "No, but I do. And the only payment I will accept is your presence in my court, where I can ensure that the man who saved my daughter's life is never in danger again." Laughed and immediately regretted it as pain flared through his ribs. "Your Majesty, I'm a security officer. Danger is literally my job description." "Then you will need a new job." The Queen moved toward the door. "Rest now, heal. When you are strong enough, we will discuss your new role. I have thoughts about how your skills might be put to use." She paused at the threshold, turning back to look at him. "Your captain was reluctant to leave without you, but I made it clear that this was a condition of the continued trade agreement. Your government was surprisingly agreeable once they understood the alternatives. My government agreed to let you keep me here. They agreed that the benefits of the trade deal outweighed the cost of one security officer." The Queen's voice was not unkind, but there was a reality in her words that cut deeper than any weapon. "You are a valuable man, Lieutenant Commander, but you are not irreplaceable, not to them." She left and lay in the alien bed, in the alien room, on the alien world, and tried to process the fact that his life had just been completely upended. He thought about Earth, about his small apartment in the city where he had grown up, about the few possessions he had accumulated over 15 years of service, about the crew of the Harmony already light years away, continuing their mission without him, about the career he had worked so hard to build, gone in a single moment of instinct. But then he thought about the princess, about her wide eyes and her trembling hands, and the way she had tried to hold his life inside him when he was bleeding out on the platform, about the fact that she was alive because he had chosen to move, to act, to put his body between her and death. He had made that choice without thinking. He would make it again in a heartbeat. Maybe that was the answer to the Queen's question. Maybe that was why he had done it. Because some things were worth protecting, regardless of the cost. The door opened again, and looked up expecting to see the Queen or perhaps a physician. Instead, he saw a small figure peering around the frame with 4 wide, curious eyes. Princess stepped into the room hesitantly, as though afraid she might be thrown out at any moment. She was dressed simply, her elaborate robes replaced by something that looked almost like casual clothing. Without the formality of the court around her, she looked even younger than she had in the great hall. She stopped at the foot of his bed, staring at him with an expression he could not read. "Hello," said, not sure what else to say. The princess said something in her own language, a string of musical syllables that might have been a greeting or a question or an accusation. Then she caught herself and switched to heavily accented but understandable standard. "You are the one who saved me." "I am." "Why?" It was the same question the queen had asked, but different somehow. Less about politics and debts and traditions, more about simple human or curiosity. "Because you needed saving," said. The princess tilted her head, a gesture that he would later learn meant confusion. "But you did not know me. I am a stranger to you. Why would you die for a stranger?" "I didn't die." "You almost did. The physicians said they have never seen anyone survive such wounds." She moved around the bed, coming to stand beside him where her mother had sat. "Your body should have stopped working. Your heart should have stopped beating. But you kept going. You kept fighting. Even when you were falling, you were trying to protect me." Did not have an answer for that. He remembered very little of those final moments, just fragments of pain and fear and a desperate need to stay between the princess and the danger. "My mother says you belong to me now," the princess continued. "She says you created a life debt that can never be repaid. Is that true in human culture as well?" "No," admitted. "We don't have life debts, at least not the way your people do." "Then why did you do it?" Looked at the young alien standing beside his bed, at her shifting silver skin and her 4 amber eyes and her expression of genuine confusion. She was so young, so innocent. She had probably never faced real danger before that night in the Great Hall. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said finally. "Because protecting people who can't protect themselves is what gives my life meaning. Because when I saw you in danger, I didn't think about consequences or rewards or anything else. I just knew I had to help." The princess was quiet for a long moment. "You are very strange," she said finally, "but I think I like you." Before could respond, she climbed onto the edge of his bed and settled herself at his feet, folding her legs beneath her in a way that looked uncomfortable but probably wasn't for her species. "I am going to stay here until you are better," she announced. "Mother said I could not come in, but she is wrong. You saved my life. That means I am responsible for yours now, and I will not let anything else bad happen to you." Opened his mouth to protest, but something in the princess's expression stopped him. This was not the casual declaration of a spoiled child. This was a promise, made with all the solemnity that her young life could muster. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know, but I want to." She looked at him with those 4 strange, beautiful eyes. "My name is, but you may call me, that is what my friends call me." "I know, Cooper, Lieutenant Commander of the Terran Navy, Security Chief of the diplomatic mission." She smiled, and the expression was surprisingly similar to a human one. "I read your file." "Everyone seems to have read my file." "You are famous now, the human who shields princesses." She reached out and touched his hand, her slender fingers tracing the pale lines across his palm. "How did you get these?" "A fire. I pulled some people out of a burning ship." "Did it hurt?" "Yes." "But you did it anyway." "Yes." The princess nodded, as though this confirmed something she had already known. "You are a protector. That is what you are. It is not just your job. It is who you are." Looked at the young alien at the foot of his bed, at her earnest expression and her gentle touch on his damaged hand. She had known him for less than an hour, and yet she understood something about him that most humans never grasped. "I suppose it is," he said. "Good." She settled back, making herself comfortable at the foot of his bed. "Then you will protect me, and I will protect you. That is how it works now." "That's not really how protection works." "It is now." She smiled again, and there was a hint of stubbornness in her eyes that reminded him of her mother. "You saved my life, Cooper. That makes us bound together, whether you understand it or not, and I do not abandon my bonds." Wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at him, dragging him back toward sleep. The conversation had taken more out of him than he had realized. "Rest now," the princess said, and her voice was softer, almost gentle. "I will be here when you wake. You should go back to your lessons." "My lessons can wait, you cannot." It was the last thing heard before sleep took him again. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of recovery and strange conversations. Princess was true to her word. Every time woke she was there, sometimes reading from a tablet, sometimes talking to him in her halting standard, sometimes simply watching him with those four curious eyes. She asked endless questions about humanity, about Earth, about his life before coming to. She told him about herself in return, about her lessons and her dreams and her frustrations with court life. Slowly, carefully, a friendship began to form. The queen visited every few days, always with the same message. Was not a prisoner, she assured him. He was an honored guest, but the terms of her decree had not changed. He would not be returning to his ship. Captain Hayes managed to get a message through once, a formal communication expressing her concern and her hope for his recovery. Between the lines, read the truth. The trade deal had been signed. The Harmony had received its orders. They were leaving space, with or without him. He was on his own. The thought should have been more frightening than it was. He was alone on an alien world, cut off from everything and everyone he had ever known. His career was over. His life as he had known it was finished. But somehow, with the princess perched at the foot of his bed telling him stories about mythology, it did not feel like an ending. It felt like a beginning. 2 weeks after he woke, the physicians declared him well enough to walk. Was there for his first steps, hovering anxiously as he made his way across the room on shaky legs. She was there when he fell, catching him with surprising strength for her small frame. She was there when he finally made it to the window, looking out for the first time at the gardens of the palace below. "It is beautiful, is it not?" she asked, standing beside him. "It is." Looked out at the crystal trees and the floating flowers and the rivers of liquid gold. "I've never seen anything like it." "I have never seen Earth. Will you tell me about it?" "It's very different from this. Less colorful, more crowded. We don't have floating gardens or crystal forests." He paused, searching for words. "But we have oceans, vast stretches of water that cover most of the planet. They change color with the sky, gray and blue and green and silver. And we have mountains, so tall that their peaks are covered in white frozen water all year round. And we have forests of living wood that have grown for thousands of years." "It sounds wonderful." "It is." Felt a pang of something, longing maybe, or loss. "I thought I would see it again someday. Now I'm not so sure." Was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his in a gesture that was surprisingly human. "I am sorry," she said. "I know this is not what you wanted, but I am glad you are here." "Why?" "Because you are my friend now, and I do not have many friends." She squeezed his hand gently. "The nobles treat me like a symbol, the servants treat me like a master, but you treat me like a person. I have never had that before." Looked down at the young princess, at her serious expression and her hopeful eyes. She was not a child, not really, not by the standards of her people who lived for centuries. But she was young and lonely and desperate for connection. Just like him in a way. "I'm glad I'm here too," he said, and was surprised to find that he meant it. The weeks turned into months. Healed fully, the medical technology proving even more advanced than the briefing files had suggested. The scars on his back were barely visible, thin silver lines that would fade with time. His shoulder regained full mobility. Even the old damage to his hands seemed improved, the nerve connections restored to something close to normal. The queen kept her word. She gave him a role in the palace, a position that used his skills without putting him in unnecessary danger. He was to train the royal guard in human combat techniques, to share what he knew about security and protection with warriors who had grown complacent in centuries of peace. It was not the life he had planned, but it was a life, and increasingly it was beginning to feel like his own. Remained his constant companion. She attended his training sessions, watching from the sidelines with fascinated attention. She joined him for meals, teaching him to eat food without making a face at the unusual textures and flavors. She walked with him through the gardens in the evenings, telling him stories about the history of her people while he told her stories about Earth. They became inseparable. The court noticed, of course. Whispers followed them through the halls, speculation about the nature of their relationship. Some thought it inappropriate, a human growing so close to the heir to the throne. Others thought it was fitting, a living symbol of the new alliance between their peoples. Ignored the whispers. He had never cared much about what other people thought, and he was not about to start now. 6 months after the attack, the Queen summoned him to her private chambers. He had been there only once before, during a formal meeting about the reorganization of the royal guard. This time, the setting was less formal. The Queen sat in a comfortable chair by a window overlooking the sunset, her robe simple, her manner relaxed. "Sit, please," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her. Sat waiting. "You have been with us for half a year now," the Queen said. "I thought it was time we spoke honestly about your situation." "I appreciate that, Your Majesty." "You are not a prisoner here. I want you to understand that." She met his eyes, all 4 of hers focusing on his too. The initial decree was necessary to honor the debt and to ensure the stability of the trade agreement, but circumstances have changed. Have they? Your government has formally accepted your transfer to service. They have even sent your personal belongings, what little you had on the ship. She smiled slightly. It seems they have decided that you are more valuable to them as a symbol of cooperation than as a security officer. Nodded, he had expected as much. The point is, you are free to leave if you wish. The trade agreement is signed and sealed. Your presence here is no longer required for political reasons. Are you asking me to leave, Your Majesty? No, the Queen leaned forward. I am asking you to choose, to stay or to go freely without coercion or obligation. Considered the question. He thought about Earth, about the career that was no longer waiting for him, about the life he had left behind. He thought about the years of service, the missions, the colleagues who had become friends and then drifted away as assignments changed. Then he thought about the crystal gardens and the floating flowers and the sunset painting the sky in colors that had no names in human languages, about the royal guard who had begun to treat him as a respected instructor rather than an outsider, about a young princess with 4 curious eyes and an endless appetite for stories about Earth. I'd like to stay, he said. The Queen smiled, and for the first time since he had met her, she looked genuinely pleased. I was hoping you would say that. She rose from her chair and moved to a small table, returning with 2 glasses filled with something that glowed faintly gold. In that case, we have much to discuss. About your future here, about my daughter, about what I hope you might become to this court. She handed him one of the glasses. To new beginnings, she said. Raised the glass. To new beginnings. He was still a long way from home. He was still a stranger in a world he barely understood. But for the first time since waking up in that alien medical bay, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The next morning, found waiting outside his quarters as usual. She fell into step beside him as he headed toward the training grounds, her 4 eyes bright with curiosity. You met with my mother last night, she said. It was not a question. I did. She asked you to stay. She gave me the choice to leave. Stopped walking. turned to find her staring at him with an expression he could not read. "And what did you choose? What do you think?" For a moment, she said nothing. Then her face broke into a smile so wide and bright that it transformed her entire appearance. "I think," she said, "that you made the right choice." She grabbed his hand and began pulling him toward the gardens, chattering about something she had learned in her lessons the day before. Let himself be led, smiling at her enthusiasm. He had come too as a guard. He had stayed as a guest. Now he was something else entirely, something that did not have a name in either language. He was home. The months turned into a year, then 2, then 5. Became a fixture of the court, as much a part of the palace as the crystal walls and the floating gardens. He trained the royal guard, transforming them from ceremonial decorations into a genuine fighting force. He advised the queen on security matters, offering perspectives from his years of human military experience. He represented humanity at formal functions, a living symbol of the alliance between their peoples. But mostly, he was the princess's protector. Grew from a young girl into a young woman, though the change was slower than it would have been for a human. Her curiosity about the universe remained undiminished and remained her primary source of information about the world beyond. They studied together, ate together, walked together through the gardens in the evenings. The whispers about their relationship never stopped, but they no longer seemed to matter. On the 5th anniversary of the attack, the Queen held a formal ceremony in the Great Hall where it had all begun. The windows had been replaced, the damage repaired, but could still see the scars in the stone where weapons' fire had struck. He could still remember the smell of smoke and the sound of screaming. The ceremony was to honor those who had fallen in the attack and to recognize those who had fought to protect the royal family. When his name was called, the hall fell silent. 1,000 watched as he walked to the throne platform and knelt before the Queen. "Lieutenant Commander Cooper of Earth," the Queen intoned, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast hall. "5 years ago, you placed your body between my daughter and death. You took wounds that should have killed you. You gave everything you had to protect a stranger." She paused and felt the weight of all those alien eyes upon him. "For this service, for this sacrifice, I grant you the title of Shield of the Crown. You are no longer a guest in our court. You are a member of our family with all the rights and responsibilities that entails." She reached out and placed her hand on his head, a gesture that he had learned was the highest honor it could bestow. "Rise, Cooper, rise and know that you are one of us." Rose on shaky legs, his vision blurred with emotions he could not name. Beside the throne was crying openly, her 4 eyes streaming with tears that sparkled in the light of the great hall. The crowd erupted in applause, a thunderous wave of sound that echoed off the crystal walls. Stood in the center of it, a human alone among aliens, and felt something he had never expected to feel again. He felt like he belonged. That evening, he found in their usual spot in the gardens, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that still amazed him even after 5 years. "Shield of the Crown," she said as he sat down beside her, "it suits you. It's just a title." "No, it's a truth." She turned to look at him, her amber eyes soft in the fading light. "You have been my shield since the moment you threw yourself in front of that weapon. The title just makes it official." Looked at the young woman beside him. She was so different from the scared child he had protected that night. Confident now and strong and wise beyond her years. But she was also the same, curious and kind and full of wonder at the universe around her. "I never thanked you," he said. "For what?" "For staying with me, in the hospital, after I was hurt." He paused, searching for words. "I was ready to give up, you know. I had lost everything. My career, my home, my entire life. And then there was this little alien girl sitting at the foot of my bed, telling me stories and asking questions and refusing to leave me alone. I told you," said. "You saved my life. That meant I was responsible for yours." Is that still true? Always. She reached out and took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his just as they had on that first day. You are my protector, Cooper, but I am also yours. That is how it works between us. Squeezed her hand gently. I wouldn't have it any other way. They sat together in the garden as the sun set and the stars came out, two beings from different worlds who had found each other in the darkness and refused to let go. The attack had taken everything from his career, his home, his entire life as he had known it. But it had also given him something. A purpose, a family, a place where he belonged. He had come to as a stranger, stayed as a guest, and become something more. He was the shield of the crown now, protector of the princess, advisor to the queen, and the living symbol of what humanity could become when given the chance. And he would protect this place, these people, this strange and beautiful world for as long as he drew breath. Because that was what he did. That was who he was. That was who he would always be. The first star appeared in the darkening sky, a tiny point of light billions of miles away. Watched it for a moment, wondering if it was the sun that warmed Earth, the world he had left behind so long ago. Then said something, and he turned to listen, and Earth faded into a pleasant memory rather than a painful loss. He was home now, and he would never leave again.